Everyone has a story, but some stories are rewritten where the dusty trails end and the infinite blue begins. John Wayne, or the Duke as we knew him, spent 50 years on the silver screen embodying justice, courage, and the rugged spirit of the American West. But when the cameras stopped rolling, when the spotlights faded, and the relentless noise of Hollywood retreated, there was another world where the legend sought refuge. This world was not found in the red sands of Monument Valley or the cold soundstages of a studio. This world lived amidst the fierce but honest waves of the Pacific Ocean. It was a place where the man eclipsed the myth, and where Marion Morrison could finally escape the shadow of John Wayne, finding a silence that only the deep sea could provide. This was his true final frontier, a place where no director could yell cut, and no critic could judge his performance. Here, the only audience was the horizon, and the only script was the wind. To understand the Duke's obsession with the sea, one must understand the man's deep-seated need for absolute freedom. John Wayne conquered the West on horseback, but he found his soul in the middle of the ocean. To many, he was inseparable from the Winchester rifle on his hip and the dusty bandana around his neck. But for the Duke, true power lay in the compass in his hand and his mastery at the helm of a massive vessel. Every hero needs an escape route from the pressures of fame and the heavy, often suffocating expectations of a global audience that always demanded him to be bigger than life. For John Wayne, that escape was a 136-foot, former World War II Minesweeper. Her name was the Wild Goose. This ship was a floating fortress for a man who wanted to flee the hollow glitter of Hollywood and seek sanctuary in the harsh, unforgiving reality of nature. It was here that he could truly breathe without the weight of an empire on his shoulders, away from the scripts, the makeup chairs, and the endless retakes. On the water, he wasn't an icon. He was a sailor navigating the currents of his own life. The Wild Goose was no ordinary yacht. She was a vessel with a soul, a rugged past that mirrored her owner's own internal grit and unyielding spirit. She had navigated the grueling paths of war, survived heavy seas, and stood the test of time long before the Duke ever stepped foot on her decks. When John Wayne bought this vessel, he didn't see it as a mere luxury item or a status symbol to show off in the harbors of Malibu. He saw it as a home, a sanctuary, and perhaps the only place where he could truly be himself among the few people he loved and trusted. He left his cowboy boots on the deck, set aside that famous Stetson hat that had become a global icon, and put on a captain's cap with the pride of a man who had earned his stripes in a different kind of frontier. From that moment on, he wasn't a star worshipped by millions. He was simply Captain Wayne. On the sea, there were no privileges, no special treatments, and no room for ego. The waves didn't care how many Oscars you had on your shelf or how many millions your films had made. The Pacific Ocean is a great equalizer, and the Duke loved that brutal honesty more than anything else in the world. It was a place where a man was judged by his skill at the wheel, not his name on a marquee. The history of the Wild Goose is as fascinating as any Western plot he ever filmed. Built in 1942, she was designed to detect and clear deadly mines from the ocean floor during the height of the war. She was built for survival, for high-stakes missions, and for resilience, traits that John Wayne valued above all else. When Wayne acquired her in the early 60s, he spent a fortune renovating her, turning the cold steel of a war machine into a warm, wood-paneled heaven filled with the character of an old-world library. He filled the cabins with memories, books, and the constant, lingering scent of expensive cigars and aged whiskey. There was a secret library on board that held hundreds of books, ranging from naval history to the complex philosophy of the American frontier. He was a man of deep intellect, often reading until the early hours of the morning as the ship swayed gently in some hidden cove. He would sit there for hours, the light of a single brass lamp reflecting off the polished wood, lost in thoughts that he could never share with the press or the public. This was the side of the man that the world rarely saw, a man who was as comfortable with a book in his hand as he was with a six-shooter on a film set. He found solace in the words of great thinkers, seeking answers to questions that his fame couldn't solve. Imagine the Duke facing a massive Pacific storm. the kind that turns the world into a chaotic swirl of gray and white. He didn't hide in his cabin or wait for the crew to handle the danger. He stood on the bridge, his large, weathered hands gripping the wheel until his knuckles turned white, feeling every vibration of the ship as it slammed against the relentless wall of water. There were stories of the Wild Goose hitting waves that would have made a younger man pray for land, but Wayne just stood there with a faint, knowing smile on his face, feeling the raw, untamed energy of the planet. He lived for those moments of confrontation between man and nature. It was the only time he felt truly alive, far away from the scripts that dictated his every move and the directors who told him where to stand. When he set sail, he took only his closest friends, his family, and the people he could trust with his life. The gossip of Hollywood, the fake smiles of the industry, and the endless demands of the studios stayed back at the pier, shrinking into insignificance as the shore disappeared. In the quiet cabins of the Wild Goose, sipping his favorite drinks, he would spend hours studying a script or poring over an old nautical chart, finding the same peace in the stars that he once sought in the desert horizons. He was a navigator of both the land and the sea, always searching for that perfect moment of clarity. Behind the scenes, the Wild Goose was the stage for some of the most legendary gatherings in American history. Presidents like Richard Nixon, world leaders, and Hollywood icons like Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr. spent nights on those decks, sharing stories and laughter under the vast Pacific stars. But despite the famous guests, Wayne often preferred the company of his crew, men who worked with their hands, smelled of salt and oil, and respected the ocean as much as he did. He was known to be a fair but tough captain, demanding excellence and discipline but offering a deep, unbreakable loyalty in return. He knew the names of their children, their struggles, and their dreams. As his health began to decline in the late 1970s, the ship became even more important to him. It was his fountain of youth, his way of staying connected to a world that didn't demand he be a legend. Even when the Big C, as he famously called his cancer, began to take its toll on his physical strength, he insisted on being on the water. The rhythmic movement of the ocean was in perfect harmony with his weary but resilient heart. The constant, eternal movement of the sea reminded him that life is a beautiful, unending cycle, and that after every dark sunset, the sun will inevitably rise again over the horizon, fresh and new, regardless of the storms of yesterday. His final trips on the Wild Goose were filled with a quiet, bittersweet nostalgia that Andrew's voice captures perfectly. He would watch his children play on the deck, teaching them the names of the constellations and how to tell the direction of the wind just by the feel of it on their sun-warmed cheeks. He was passing on a legacy that had nothing to do with acting, box office records, or fame, and everything to do with character, survival, and respect for the world around them. He wanted them to remember him not as the hero on the silver screen, but as the father who loved the sea and found peace in the salt air. Every hero needs a harbor to rest their soul before the final curtain call, and for John Wayne, that harbor was every quiet, secluded bay where he dropped anchor, away from the flashing bulbs of the paparazzi and the heavy, sometimes crushing expectations of a public that demanded he be a hero 24 hours a day. On the Wild Goose, he was allowed to be tired. He was allowed to be a father. He was allowed to be just a man named Marion Morrison, a man who had traveled a long road and was finally coming home to the water. The nights on the Pacific were the longest. As the engine hummed a steady lullaby, Wayne would often stand on the deck alone, staring into the black abyss of the ocean. He thought about his friends who were gone, the films he had made, and the impact he had left on the world. He was a man who knew his time was short, yet he didn't look back with regret. Instead, he looked forward to the next tide. He spent hours writing letters to his children, pouring his heart into pages that would be read long after he was gone. These letters weren't about Hollywood. They were about honesty, hard work, and the importance of never backing down from a fight. He wanted his children to understand that the true measure of a man wasn't found in the applause of a crowd, but in the quiet moments of integrity when no one was watching. This philosophical depth is what made him more than just an actor. It made him a cultural icon whose influence would span generations. He knew that the myth was powerful, but the truth was more important. And the truth was always found out there, where the deep blue water meets the sky. As we approach the final minutes of this deep dive into the archives, we must remember that John Wayne was a man of immense complexity and hidden depths. He was a man who loved crossing boundaries, reaching from the dry, red dust of the earth to the deep, mysterious blue of the sea. His legacy does not just live on in flickering black and white films or in the hallowed halls of cinema history. The spirit of the wild goose still glides somewhere in the collective memory of the world, whispering his stories among the waves and the wind. Our journey in this series continues just like his. Our route will sometimes veer into the dusty, dangerous roads of the frontier and sometimes into the deep, dark waters of an icon's private life. But as always, we will have Andrew's haunting, vintage voice and the golden, scratched light of legends by our side to guide us through the film grain and the dust of time. We are searching for the truth behind the mask, the man behind the shadow, and the captain behind the cowboy. Each frame of this documentary is a tribute to that search, a piece of the puzzle that is John Wayne. The myth of the Duke is not a static image frozen in a frame of film. It is a living, breathing testament to the human spirit's eternal need for both adventure and peace. John Wayne once famously said that courage is being scared to death, but saddling up anyway. Perhaps for him, in his final years, the ultimate act of courage was leaving the safety of the shore behind and facing the vast, beautiful, and terrifying unknown of the Pacific. He wasn't running away from life. He was running toward a deeper, more authentic version of it. He was a man who knew that the horizon is never the end, but merely a new beginning for those brave enough to sail toward it with their heads held high. He knew that the film grain of our lives, with all its scratches and imperfections, is what makes the final picture beautiful and real. He embraced the dust and the salt, knowing they were the marks of a life well lived, a life that was as vast and deep as the ocean he loved. He was a man of the earth, but his soul belonged to the tides. Keep your eyes on the horizon, my friends, because the legend of John Wayne will never sink as long as there are stories to tell, films to watch, and dreams to follow. The ride is far from over, and Andrew still has many tales buried in the dusty archives of history, waiting to be brought back to the light. We are moving forward together, grain by grain, frame by frame, into the very heart of cinematic history. The dust is rising, the waves are calling, and the legend lives on in every flickering frame of film grain. Thank you for being part of this 10th chapter in our journey. The frontier is vast and the ocean is deep, but with a captain like the Duke and a voice like Andrew's, we will never lose our way in the dark. See you in the next archive, where the grain gets thicker, the dust settles deeper, and the stories get even more legendary. The legend of the Sea Duke is just one of many, and we are here to ensure they are never forgotten. Fair winds, following seas, and a long ride to you all. The legend continues, and our cameras are still rolling, capturing the soul of the past for the future to see. Until the next sunset, stay gold and stay restless.